Hi there, it's Deborah O'Toole, textile artist, and today I'm going to show you how I make my little quilted embellished motifs, I guess, that I use to create my bigger artworks. I like the fact that the batting in between gives it a little bit of a sort of a three-dimensional look. It makes them a bit puffy. So what I'm going to be using is a backing piece of fabric, I need the batting, and then I need the decorative pieces for the top. What I love about this artwork that I do is that I get to use up all sorts of scraps and bits and pieces because I really hate throwing things away. This is an old sheet and you can use anything, pillowcases, you could use tea towels, any piece of woven fabric that can be ironed nice and flat can be used for the bottom piece of the artwork. So, with my trusty scissors. So it only has to be very rough. It doesn't have to be perfect or anything. This is just the backing piece. And then this is just the batting which goes in the middle. I can make this as high or as thin as I like. I could layer it up with extra pieces like this. But then what would happen is that sometimes the machine struggles to get around it. So I'll just make this a single layered piece. Just going to make sure that this will cover the bottom piece more or less. And then I'll get another piece to go on the top before I then add the decorative fabric. So this is essentially two pieces of fabric about the same size and shape. I'm going to just iron them up and get them ready to add the top fabric. So you don't have to iron these very well. In fact, you could not even bother with this batting piece. I just iron it because it can get a little bit crinkly. Right, so before we layer those up, I just want to show you the top fabric layers that I'm going to be using. Essentially, I use probably no more than two or three colors. And here I've got two different pieces of naturally dyed fabrics. These fabrics were dyed with blackberries. And just because of the different temperatures and the different part of the dye bath, whether they were in contact with any metals, will make the difference as to whether they became more pink or more blue. So I quite like those together. And this is just a sheer piece of commercially dyed silk organza. And I really like the sheer elements to these pieces because, as you can see, when these get laid on the top, it almost creates a different colour, a different fabric. So I'll just give these a quick iron and then we can start to put it together. Okay, so I've brought you in a little closer here so that you can see what I'm doing. So the first thing we need to do is create a sandwich with these fabrics, and I just like to trim it off so that we don't have too many bits hanging around. And I don't mind if there are some areas that are doubled up here with the batting in between, so that's fine like that. Just trim that off, and this piece just goes over the top. Try and make sure nothing's bunched up, and just a few pins. Okay, so now we get to the fun bit, which is choosing the fabrics and the shapes. So you can see in this bit here, I've basically just used sort of petal shapes in slightly different sizes and roundness. Some of them are a bit longer and skinnier than others, and I do find that that creates a nice sort of balance. So I'll do the same here, and I want to get some areas that are just plain and then other bits that have got that pattern on it. So I'll start over here. It's quite an organic shape and I don't really like that point, so I'll just take it off. All these little scrap pieces I keep as well, because there are projects you can do with the tiniest little scraps. And I'll probably do a video on one of those projects at some point. Change over to this piece. Try and use the corners because that reduces waste. You can use really any type of fabric that you think your machine will go through. So my machine really likes thin fabrics. These silks are a little bit flimsy. Anybody that does quilting will probably prefer to just use a nice sturdy woven fabric like cotton or something. This is why so many quilts are cotton. But I just love the luxe sheen that the silk gives. This makes it look a bit more special. So we're getting some movement there. What I make sure I do is not to make it too crowded, because we also have this piece here, and I'll show you what happens there. What I'll do is pop them onto there, and you can sort of see how they're going to look. Another great thing is this negative space that you get. Just pop that there. So this little negative space works quite well in the artwork, so I try not to crowd them together too much, as I said. Something like that. Don't really like this shape. This is where you can already edit a little bit of the artistic process. So what you can see is happening there is once this sheer, once this sheer piece goes on top, it then creates another little shape of itself, which I really like. I think what I'm going to do is have it coming out this way. Again, see, that's a little rough. I do like the organic shapes, but if something jars my eye, then I just deal with it straight away. Again, this is a bit straight, so it needs to be flowing and organic line, but not jarring to the eye. So pop that there. Yeah. Another couple of little ones. And if I put that there, then I get this negative space happening here again. Do I need another one? Yeah, I think we need another little one here. Yeah, I quite like that. So what effectively this has been is a design problem solving exercise. I just use my intuition as a guide to what in the way of scale and line is going to work. If we had too many of the same size or shape pieces, I probably find that it wouldn't work as well. And I have finished pieces which I looked at later on and thought there's something wrong with it. It just looks a bit static, and I've realized that there just wasn't enough of this curved movement going on, or the open space. Anyway, they're the things you learn from mistakes. So this has to be stitched down, but before I do that, I've got a way to stick it all down, and this is one of the best little pieces of equipment or kit I've ever come across. It's basically a glue pen stick, but it's quite tacky. It's not very, very sticky. It's Soline is the brand, but you can get replacement cartridges that just sort of stick in the end. My good friend Helen Stubbings from Hugs and Kisses down in Hobart, Tasmania, put me onto this product, and it's completely changed the way I work. So big shout out to Helen. She's a very, very talented quilter and designer. And if you haven't come across Helen Stubbings at Hugs and Kisses yet, and you're into beautiful traditional quilts and new patterns, then yeah, check her out. I might put the her link in the information below in the description. So if you're interested in checking out Helen, her work is completely different to mine. Okay, now I've got to remember where I put these things. I try not to go with too much glue underneath the sheer ones, because occasionally the glue remains visible and I don't really want that. Generally it will just dry and you won't be able to see it. How did we go? It was like that and that, wasn't it? But if I do get a piece that is showing through, then I don't worry too much about it at this stage, because I'm going to do some sequining over the top. So if there is a little ugly bit, I'll just put a bead on the top. A lot of my work is just trial and error and organically working with the fabric, and if I come across a problem, I just deal with it as it goes. I have got a little bit close to that edge, haven't I? All right, so that's all. Whoop, that's all sort of sticking down as much as I need it to sew it. I might just give it another couple of little bits on the side so it doesn't bunch up too much while I'm sewing it. There. It's so much better than pinning, because as you can imagine, if I were to just take a piece, if I were to pin that, you can't help but getting bits that are bunched up. And also not having pins on the fabric means that I can just go hell for leather with the machine and I don't have to worry about stopping to pull the pins out or breaking a needle or anything. So this is my ideal situation with this fabulous product. I'm just going to give another little plug. You can see that you use quite a bit, and then I just screw it up and down like a lipstick. Okay, what I'm going to do now is, normally I would do a few more here. I would have enough room to keep going with it, just to use up this little bit of space. But I'll leave it with this for now, and I'm going to go and set up next to the sewing machine so we can get this all stitched down. Okay, so here I am at the sewing machine, and I'm about to put back on this, what we call a free motion stitching foot that looks a bit like that. I have seen them on other sewing machines that have this as a little sort of round hole, but anyway, this is what mine looks like. So I'll go ahead and put that on. Okay, so I've threaded it up with some good quality embroidery thread, which goes beautifully through the machine. I did try and do some of this work a little while ago, and I just sort of skimped on the thread and it didn't work. It was all really quite terrible, and I learnt my lesson that you need good quality products to get a good quality result. So I do recommend, if you are going to do this, especially with this free motion stitching, that you get good quality embroidery machine threads, or machine embroidery threads I should say. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stitch this down. So what I need to do now is cut out the shape out of the fabric. And I decided on this idea just one day when I had a piece and I just didn't know what to do, and I just thought, I'm just going to cut it up and see what it looks like when you sort of take it away from the backing. What I had planned to do on that project was just a big piece with a lot of appliqued motifs on top of it. But then I discovered that if you just get a bit ruthless and start cutting into things, it was actually quite hard to cut into it, sort of emotionally. Now, even though I don't mind the fraying, I like to get this all as neat as possible. First of all, I'll just cut it out, and then I can go back and trim it to make it a bit neater. So there is the cutout piece. There might be some other little bits that I might go back to later, but this is enough for now. And now we'll go on to the beading of the piece. Okay, so here we are at my bead station. This is where I have all my fun because I really love beading. It's one of my favorite things. I love just sitting here for hours and hours, listening to a podcast or music and just mindlessly sewing. When I say mindlessly, it really is an intuitive process for me to figure out which bead will go where on a piece. So I put all the thought into which beads I'll use beforehand, because I've got a 1,000 different types of beads, but I like to limit it to just a few so that the look is sort of coordinated. And I generally just sort of go along and hold the piece up to some beads and figure out whether it's going to work, or put some beads on a piece and go, yep, that's definitely what I want to do. So what I've chosen is some silver tubes. I've got this palette of different colors. I think I'm going to use some red here because I do like to use surprise colors, and of course these sort of purples are very much in keeping with the colors that I've got on the piece. I do need a few little pops of something light and bright, so I've got these quite large pale pink beads and a few different colors of sequins. So that is sort of a pale bluey green. This is a more of a forest green, and these are silver sequins. It's important to have different sizes as well of the sequins or the little seed beads, because that's what sort of gives you a bit of variation and makes the piece interesting, like this one. I usually like to keep a reference handy if I am trying to recreate something. Sometimes you just don't remember where you put things or how it sort of went. So it's good to have a reference just sitting there handy. I am using the same thread that I used in the machine. This is a lovely machine embroidery thread, but I find that it's nice and strong, and it also doesn't get tangled up because it's really lovely and smooth. I actually can't remember the brand of this one, but I'll find out and let you know. I have my trusty pin cushion just out of shot here, and I've already threaded it up. I have to use very, very fine needles for this. Basically, the eye has to be really, really small to get some of these little tiny beads over it. So if I use a needle that's too large, I just can't use half of the beads that I've got. So I'm just going to put my glasses on, because these days I really have a bit of trouble looking at my work. Anyway. Helps if I've knotted the end. Sometimes I look at the back of the work and it actually kind of appeals to me how the black thread on the white light coloured background. Looks a bit like a fine liner. I love doodling with fine liners, but anyway, this is what we're working with. So another little handy thing I use is this gaudy little fridge magnet that I got on a cruise to New Caledonia as a souvenir. And it's just the handiest thing to just have there on the desk, and I can just pick it up and don't have to sort of scrounge around to pick up my pins and needles. Okay, here we go. Start in the center, and I start with something large. As you can see, what's happened here with all the machine stitching, it's sort of concentrated in the center there, and this one's not too bad, but sometimes it can look really messy, so I tend to cover it up with beads like this one. I cover it up with actually large beads that will cover that messy area of stitching. Okay, well, I reckon this is done. What do you think? It's pretty sparkly, isn't it? Just the way I like it. You could keep going with the beading if you really wanted to go to town and make it like crusty embellished, but I quite like it as it is. Like I mentioned earlier, I put several of these motifs together to create the kind of artworks that you see behind me. In the next video, I'll be starting a brand new commission piece. I'll be using a little bit of a different technique than what I've done here. So if you're keen to catch that, be sure to hit subscribe. And of course, share this video with all your friends. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for joining me. Bye for now.